What is going on, guys? Cameron here from the D&D Coalition. So today, I am accompanied by Keith from Fire and Dice, of course. Thank you, Keith, for being here with us tonight. But also, we've got the cast of It's a Mimic. So we've got Adam, Dan, and Terry, and then behind the scenes we got Shanana. Did I say her name right?
Shanna, like banana.
Shanna like banana. Okay. So we've got It's a Mimic. A lot of you guys have heard their podcast. They're I've heard them been called one of the hidden gems out there on the internet. But three incredibly hilarious guys, very strong personalities, and couldn't be more stoked to have them on. So thank you so much, you guys, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And then Keith, once again, thank you for accompanying us.
Of course, thank you. Welcome, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Keith.
So start us off. Tell us a little about your podcast, about your page. Introduce yourselves.
Sure. Who's going first? We usually roll it before we speak, so do we
There's
just
not
go
dice in my hand, and I feel naked.
I always go last, so.
Rock, paper, scissors, what is this?
Okay, I'll go first. So I'm Adam. You can find me at Rusty Styrofoam on It's a Mimic. And our podcast is, I guess, more D&D discussion than it is. I mean, DM tips.
Basically,
stuff,
we just get into arguments about Dungeons and Dragons, and somehow information's still disseminated.
Yeah, I think we try and look at things from a different angle as well, and we try and stay away from, or we acknowledge the tropes, but we try and get a little bit more creative with gameplay and teach people to do things in a little bit more of a creative way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why you guys are so popular, is because it's not just another D&D stream, D&D podcast. It's you guys get into it. And I know each of you also DMs your own separate games, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys...
Though not currently.
Okay.
so no, but also yes.
Gotcha. Do you guys play in each other's games, or are they separate from the three of you?
Oh, no, we sit around a table together.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually, Adam was the one, he got us all kind of connected together playing in his game.
We met through Adam's game.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. We met from playing.
Well, I met because Terry was DMing a friend, and I got invited in. So, we've all, I mean, Dan and I have known each other for decades.
25 years?
Decades.
Okay.
25 years, yeah.
But D&D has really been the thing that's brought us together.
Yeah.
So.
And you guys are joining us from Alberta?
No. Oh, God.
Oh,
No,
almost.
Whoa.
Almost.
There's nothing wrong with Alberta, except for all the things that are
We're
wrong
not
with
having
Alberta.
this conversation.
we're in British Columbia. We're in Vancouver.
Yeah, we're the West Coast.
Okay, got it. Okay.
We're the only part of Canada that doesn't snow.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. I live in Florida, so there's no snow down here. It's great.
You live in Florida?
Yes.
Nice.
I grew up in Illinois, though, so the weather was shit for like 9 months out of the year. So shout out to the Midwest.
Okay, well, I know where Florida is. I don't know where Illinois is.
Is Illinois another one of these that has 9 months of snow and 3 months of mosquitoes?
Yes.
And that's the weather?
Yeah.
Well, someone's got to do it. So God bless you, man.
Exactly. My parents were just down here this past weekend for Memorial Day. There's a holiday here in America, Memorial Day weekend. So they were down here just for the weekend visiting, and my mom we kept driving over the bridges and stuff. There's a ton of bridges down here, and she put her hand on my shoulder. She'd be like, "Oh, son, it's so pretty." She'd be like, "Yeah, Mom, it's Florida.
Beautiful in Florida.
It's water. I get it."
That's it.
So, and then Keith, where are you joining us from tonight?
I am from Virginia.
Virginia.
Oh, yeah, right on.
Nice.
Yeah, just south of Washington, D.C. If you know the
All
location.
right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just about 40 miles south. Weather is great. We're in the mid-80s. It's close to 90 today.
Nice. Love it.
So, okay.
Go Redskins.
Go Redskins, yes. Exactly. So, all right.
I kind of want
Sports reference, really?
You're on your own, Dan.
We're supposed to be nerds here, guys. What the hell? This is supposed to be a professional D&D podcast talking about rolling dice and talking in funny voices, and then you make a sports reference. Dear God.
I ruined that early.
At least it wasn't cricket this time.
Yeah. Have we released that episode?
No, not yet.
No, not yet. In an upcoming episode, you'll hear us really dig into Terry for mentioning cricket.
That's how you guys all about cricket. I'll talk about cricket all day long. In fact, let's just railroad this whole thing down. We'll talk about it right now.
So Keith, make a note not to bring It's a Mimic on once again. Anyway, so All right, so you guys, tell me a little about your podcast. I feel like that's your guys' big thing, what you guys do. Obviously, you guys all play, but this podcast, what the hell inspired and brought this about? Give us your little elevator speech for the podcast you run. It's a Mimic.
I feel like we're all going to have different elevator speeches for this one.
Yeah,
do you want to go first again?
I went first last time.
Dan,
you
go
go. Yeah, Dan, you go.
All right. So the podcast idea came about. We were all playing for Adam's Sunday night game, and I joined when we had a couple of our members. They were getting ready to pack up and leave and go to Australia. So I showed up and saw that we were recording the actual gameplay and all this other stuff. I'm like, oh, this is really cool, and it kind of planted that bug. And then Adam and I started talking about a couple separate projects because we both passion
and it was funny because we were sitting there talking about, do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? I wanted to do a YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. We're going back and forth, and then we talked about it because we carpool in to Terry's house that night, and then we talked about it the entire way in. And as we're packing up and leaving at the end of the night, Terry turns to us and goes, "You guys want to do a podcast?" And we're like, "Yes, yes, we do." Yeah. So it was fortuitous. It was good timing.
Yeah, and we went through a couple name changes and everything else before we settled on It's a Mimic.
Oh yeah, we're on version 2. We recorded like 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah, canned it, didn't like it.
No, it was a radically different show, and it didn't have Terry being so funny. So.
That's a lot of pressure.
We sat down and we had a conversation with Terry and told me he had to be funnier.
That's it. I feel like there's a lot of content out there which is just quick little GM tips or player tips, but it gets repetitive and it's the same kind of thing. And I found that a lot of problems were coming up was really just related more to social interactions, just how to deal with different types of people, adapt. And I felt like that's just the area in life from my own career outside of doing this that I felt like I could help a little bit more instead of just going over the same tips. We really talk about how to play as people, right? And that was just like as characters.
How to work together to tell a story.
Yeah, that's it.
And how to use the bits and pieces of lore and the stuff that's in the books. How to use that to help yourself have more fun.
Yeah, and then we try and combine it because you two have so much experience. I mean, you're so lore heavy, Dan.
Yeah.
And you're so technical, and I really just throw like the voice of the noob in whatever we do. So when these guys will go off on their rants about how they're sick to death of like hippie druid elves or something, and I kind of bring it back to, okay, well, the newer players will think like this, not like this, and it seems to work well. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I was just gonna say, Terry, you said it perfect. I've listened to some of your podcasts. I've listened to probably at least 4 or 5 of them. I haven't caught up to all of them, but that's what I love about you guys' podcast is that you all 3 come at it from completely different angles, and then you guys also just mesh so well together. Like the conversation, I just listen to you guys, and it's just a good conversation between a couple of guys about D&D, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, it seems to work. I think we found a way to flow. We flow well.
We do flow well. Yeah.
Also, we pay Dan the big bucks to edit out when we're not flowing well.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. We record like 4-hour segments. I cut it down to a nice tight hour 20, and
just a lot.
Which is also the name of the sex tape. Anyway.
Oh, well, I'm good with that. I
got it. Yeah, that's beautiful. And a lot of it's probably Terry like sheening up his hair, doing talking about his glorious flow.
We have constant selfie breaks.
That's awesome.
Sometimes. Like Adam and I have just started to work through it. It's just something that ends up happening. Terry will just start taking selfies.
Guys.
So whenever you guys start Twitch streaming, you're just gonna say have one of those like screens that pop up say Twitch will resume soon once Terry's done with his hair.
Yeah,
that's it.
Pretty much.
We're gonna take 52 selfies and then we're all gonna choose a filter together.
Selfie break.
That's right.
just throw on that intermission song from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. That's awesome. So yeah, that's why I really enjoyed your guys' page whenever I first stumbled upon it, is because you guys talk about a lot of the issues that are at tables, which sometimes people can't put a name to it, they can't describe it, and you guys talk about those things because you guys, one, you are so close with each other, so that there's not really anything that's off limits. But I tuned into one of them. I think it was episode 9, or maybe it was even further back from that. But it was actually a situation that I was encountering myself. And it was something that I'm really good friends with the people that I play D&D with, but I didn't know how to address it because I didn't know how to put a name to it. And you guys identified it, and we're actually able to work through it. This sort of situation was just kind of laying down ground rules or laying down table rules without being a dick of a DM, saying, okay, these are the rules, this is the table, you guys have to do this, 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 and this. But what you guys did, it allowed me to kind of take inventory of, okay, what do I want my game to be, and how do I make it that way, and how do I portray it to everybody else to make it think that I'm not trying to be a dictator here. So from you guys firsthand, what do you guys personally do when you sit at a table to make sure that you establish those ground rules?
You first?
Well, I went first last time. So.
Yeah. I think you just need to be honest from the start. I think lots of times with people, what happens is we overcomplicate situations. And we sit back and we think, okay, how do I handle this problem, this problem? Most of the time, people don't realize if they're doing something, wrong, in air quotes, or if they're doing something that other people don't agree with. They're just living their life based off what they think's right. So if you just lay the expectations down from the very start, ask if everybody's in agreement, keeps it simple. It means it's not rude, and it means you don't have to run into that confrontation later on. And if you do run into something where somebody's deviating away from that, it's just a reminder of, hey, we said this before. Is this still what you want to do? Because everyone else thinks we're going in this direction. And that way you're not being negative. You're not challenging someone or making them feel uncomfortable. You're just reminding them of what they agreed with and asking them if they still do. And if they're like, hey, you know what, that's kind of not what I'm into anymore, then that's totally fine. And then that way it just doesn't come across as aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tend to really hammer on the concept of a session zero.
Yeah.
Where we all sit down and we honestly think it's built a lot of life into our games and our parties. Like, I've even taken the concepts to the group of guys I've been playing D&D with for 20 plus years. I've taken that concept of a session zero over to them, and it's made a lot of our like session 4 or 5 arguments have completely disappeared because these discussions we had early managed to set us on a proper path.
Yeah.
Right. And it's honestly, it's kind of Adam's brainchild. I haven't seen the term session zero anywhere before Adam and I really started talking about it. So
I'm trying to remember where I stole that from. That was Bill. We're talking about a session zero, and I think they were talking about before session 1, and they just backed out and said, so session 0. And I loved that idea.
Yeah.
The concept of sitting down. You're all friends. You're all going to sit down and do a thing together. What's wrong with sitting down for a couple hours ahead of time, considering your campaign is going to be hundreds of hours long? Spend a little bit at the beginning communicating about it.
Yeah.
And I just started DMing a group shortly after we did that episode, just a small Theater of the Mind group on Tuesday nights for a couple hours in the evenings, but they were all new players. And so sitting down and thinking about what is a session zero, not only did I get to help them build characters and what books do you look in, do you want feats or ability score improvements and like that kind of stuff, but we also sat down and talked about what are your boundaries. And it was real quick and easy. They said, hey, you know what? Sexual assault is off the table. Assaulting children is very much on the table. Let's do that because it affects us emotionally.
Yeah.
We can get into it. Don't attack dogs specifically and be kind to animals.
Only children.
Yeah,
but not dogs.
Children free game.
that is
Dogs too
backwards as
far.
hell.
Because we don't deserve dogs.
But it was we're 100% on board with all sorts of crazy body horror. Make it as scary as you want.
This was an evil campaign.
Yeah,
we should be clear.
But nothing with teeth, because one person has a phobia about teeth, which never would have occurred to me. And I'm like, this is why we need to talk.
No more toothy maws.
Everything in D&D is teeth, right?
It's all toothy maws.
So it really pointed me in a different direction, and it's been a lot of fun. But I never would have known that if we hadn't sat down and talked about it ahead of time.
Yeah. Keith, I know you usually do session zeros where you kind of discuss things like that with your players.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just did one. Yesterday we played our main campaign last night, but prior to that I met with a different group that were starting Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and we met. Of course, everybody started making their characters, and we did exactly what Adam was talking about. We discussed things, kind of how the campaign, the idea of it, what people were comfortable with, and just ideas about the whole campaign and their characters in general. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Mm-hmm. I did want to ask a question to you three. Since you all three DM games together and everybody's in each other's game, do any of you have rules that the other one or two do not have as DMs when it's your turn to be in charge?
Well,
Adam.
Yeah.
well, you go first, Adam. I think on this.
Yeah,
one.
I have a ton of homebrew rules.
I think
Adam is a very I like to say methodical. Some would say
Adam can't-
tyrannical.
Adam can't let
Dungeon
things
Master.
be.
No,
And he
he
has
can't.
to change it.
He does.
Like, you can be like, here's this perfectly master-crafted product that 75,000 people have game tested and said it's perfect. So go and play it. And
And
he'll
Adam
go,
goes,
no.
no
no way.
teleporting or divination.
We're gonna change this.
Or
Well, that's kind of what D&D's all about as well.
Yeah,
It's your creative outlet.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with the swim rules, although I haven't read Ghost of Saltmarsh yet, and I think they get into that. Wasn't happy with the swim rules in D&D. I don't think it makes any sense, especially for underwater combat. You can hold your breath for 6 minutes fighting people
Yeah, it's fucked.
underwater. Doesn't make sense to me. That's one thing off the top of my head. But I did a homebrew campaign when I took over from Terry's. Terry's ended. He ran Curse of Strahd. We started off with 7 people, ended up with 5 at the end, sitting around the table. And then when it ended,
We kill our players
yeah,
when they die.
Not
when
just
their-
characters.
When their character dies. It's
Yeah.
all part of it.
yeah. But when Terry said, "Okay, I'm done," I said, "I'll take over the next chapter." But it had been a long time since I DM'd, and I'd only been looking at 5th Ed for about 4 months, and I wasn't 100% certain on how it was all going to work out. And so I built a homebrew world where the goddess of death is close and has trapped everybody in and is bringing people into the world. So teleportation doesn't work, planar shift doesn't work, divination is shut down, necromancy is super powered, but resurrection is not available, and it changed the entire feel of the game.
Yeah.
yeah,
Just by shutting down spell schools. So
That's huge.
it got a lot more harsh, but also like you made sure that the party was on board when you did that,
yeah,
which is vital. Like making sure all your players are on board with the fact that dim door doesn't work the way that it should anymore, and that's a key spell that is in so many campaigns and is like it's a game changer in so many ways. And you've said no, dim does not work. Don't select it. Don't choose it. Don't anything with it.
no, you can go ahead and select it, but it's going to work differently.
Right.
And then I'll sit
So
down
this
with the
is
player
some-
and say, how do we want to find a compromise?
So these are the things you guys discussed at your session 0.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. That also ends up being a lot of Facebook arguments
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
As we go on. As people level, I find that I have a little session 0 kind of during midweek between levels as people are trying to figure out what spells and should I cross class into warlocks? How do patrons work in this world and stuff like that as
Right.
well. But it's all about open communication, right?
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah. Yeah, Adam's pretty good at keeping it open. Like it's an open discussion from the start because people rely on their character builds to follow certain rules. So if things in that particular campaign are going to be different, we always appreciate just having the open discussion about it. I'm a little bit different. Like weirdly enough, I think because I always talk about being fluid and flexible, I'm probably the DM which is most rules as written.
Yeah.
Is what I follow. I just say, hey, this is the standard expectation. If something weird comes up, we'll talk about it at the table as D&D usually goes. But just so everyone knows where we go, it's just rules by the book, and we'll make any little adjustments along the way.
Yeah, I do a couple small things, primarily where the religion side of things is placed. One of the groups I run with is a bunch of guys from my church, so I didn't want to lay a bunch of like requirements to worship other gods on
Right,
people who
yeah.
might have issues with that. So I kind of hand waved that and said, you guys can follow a domain, and it's more of a ambiguous notion
It's more like a paladin's oath.
more
than
like
it
a
is-
paladin's oath than it is a devotion to a deific creature. So I've done things like that. We do things like inspiration dice differently
Yeah.
with our groups.
We do more inspiration dice.
Tons. We
Yeah.
hand out dozens of inspiration dice because we want you guys to be superheroes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like there's a couple weird homebrew rules we use.
Yeah, crit tables. Throw on crit tables
Yeah.
as well.
How do you guys hand out your inspiration?
Yeah. We vote at
Yeah.
the end of the session. The players vote who they think deserves based on what they achieved or what they did during the game.
And then at the end, afterwards, the DM will say, which is usually me, will say, that was really good. I also want to do a shout out to this person. Take a D4 for this. This is really cool. Take a D6 for this. Everybody take a D8 for defeating this in a creative way.
Yeah.
And we hand it out like that because we don't have resurrection. The game is so much deadlier. So sort of
Yeah.
balancing it.
We also have achievements as well. Adam has a whole list of achievements that we can unlock, I guess, scratch off. Maybe like 6 pages.
It's
worth.
like Xbox achievements.
Different
right?
categories: social encounters, random encounters.
Decapitates 50 monsters and get a D6 or something.
Commit a genocide. Die once, die twice, die 3 times, and then you get inspiration dice as you cross off. I guess groups of common categories. Yeah.
That's awesome. I actually, as a way, so me personally, I love to write. I mean, I think anybody that DMs, they do it because they enjoy writing. So as a way for not only one to help me, but also help my players, I would do these big recaps on D&D Beyond, basically where the campaign page is at. You can make it public, so all of your players can see it and they can see session notes from it. So one thing that I personally do is at the very beginning, I did it mainly for my own record, writing these small stories, and then one of my players mentioned like, "Oh yeah, I saw what you're doing with those session notes. Like, I saw you didn't write it this week. What's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, you guys can see that?" And they're like, "Yeah, I read them every week." And then so we just made it a thing where every week, whenever I get around to writing it, I always mention we do a Slack channel where it's like a group chat. I always mention recap is up. And then for the people that would read it, because sometimes I'd put little Easter eggs in there or things that they might have gotten but glossed over, those would be in there so they'd hit all those points. And what I found is that it would make the game that much more rich. And especially because we do a lot of homebrew where we're drawing into a lot of characters' backstories. And it's easy to kind of, as a player, it's easy to tune out when the story's not about you. And it's about, your compatriots or your companions' backstory. And it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately it's just human nature. If the spotlight's not on us, then we kind of tend to tune out a little bit. But it had a way of bringing everybody in and drawing everybody that much into the story and that much deeper. And so what I would do is at the end of every recap, I would have like a code phrase or code word that I would have them either announce at the next session or text me or whatever, but it would always be something like stupid and quirky. But I found that those little small things with the awarding the inspiration were huge. And I'll just do an advantage die. But it made such an impact on the game. And it made people very interested. We have a group of 6 people, so it's kind of a rotating door where there might be one person out. But there'd be certain situations where people would be like, "Oh no, please don't do that next week because I can't be there. Like, go do something else." So it's always interesting to see your players that are interested in the story that you're weaving and get excited. Yeah. So, but that's really cool. You guys did that. I 100% agree with that. That's awesome.
Keith, how do you handle inspiration?
That's what I was about to ask.
Yeah. Inspiration, I kind of hand it out as the game goes. If someone does something creative or something heroic at that time, I'll go ahead and hand them out inspiration at that point. I've never actually thought about doing it at the end of the game. I used to do experience that way. I would add up the experience for whatever they got that night when I would do leveling up with experience. And then I would give additional experience as well for certain things that they did, certain possible kills or things. But I might think about that for inspiration and actually maybe hand it out that way at the end of the night.
I really like it because at the end of the night, because it becomes a resource management for the next session.
Right.
Which is a lot of fun. But I think that doing it mid-session, saying, "Hey, that's great, take a D6, would encourage people to be constantly trying to do new, fun, interesting ideas instead of just, waiting for their turn.
I find it actually brings the team together more as well.
Yeah.
Because you're appreciating what other people are doing
and
for the group.
When Terry said that what we do is we vote on it, it's close, but basically everyone around the table that are players, not necessarily the DM, has Adam will say, "Okay, everyone, you're giving out a D8 this week." And we'll be like, "Okay, well, I want to give my D8 for Terry because of this interaction with this goblin where he used this really cool voice or something like that," right? And it becomes this kind of recap as well for all of the players to keep the entire session fresh. There's been quite a few times we'll be like, "Okay, we'll get to the end of the session and we'll be like, okay, let's do inspiration. Everyone's got a D8. Where did we start?" We're like, "We started on the boat over on the..." Wow, that feels like hours, like weeks ago we started at this point. Yeah. So we get to recap as we go. And that kind of gets us all on the same page for next week as well, because we all have a run through at that moment.
Well, that's one of the things that you do, Dan, with your inspiration is you make your players write up recaps and the person that does the best one gets an inspiration die. Well,
I make them all do the work for me. I'm lazy.
That's brilliant.
But that's actually a great idea, because when I've realized that when I've talked to some of the players, and because I'll generally write up the recap, and I do a quick recap at the beginning of each session.
Mhm.
But I've noticed that when I talk to people about it, everyone has a slightly different recap of what actually happened in that session.
Right.
You know, that's the cool thing about it. I like how you do that and have everybody else write it up.
Yeah, it's also beneficial because if they say something that is blatantly wrong, I could correct them in that moment and be like, and then we fought that beholder. I'm like, dude, no, that was a spectator. I like not a beholder.
Nah,
Get
bitch,
her
that was a kitten.
That's a good question. That brings me to a good question that you said that that I'm kind of interested in on how you guys handle this is with creatures. Do you guys tell them what the creatures are, or do you just describe it and keep that theater of mind and make them try and figure out what it is?
Okay,
whose turn is
can
it?
I go first?
Yeah, you do it. Yeah.
My answer is yes.
Here's the thing with this is these guys have played so long. I mean, especially Dan, to the point where they're not surprised anymore.
Yeah.
So we're playing the game, and Adam will describe what we see, what we hear, what we smell, and I'm sucked in like, OMG, what is this thing? This sounds terrifying. I have no idea. And
I'm
Dan
over there going, it's a Bodak.
Dan will just casually drop the name of the creature. Drives me mad. We'll just casually drop the name of the creature as though we all know what it is. And I'm like, oh, that's what it is? I have
Okay,
no idea.
I have to defend myself here real quick. When I was in the college age of, I did not go to college until later on in life, but when I was like in my early 20s, me and my roommate, who is the guy who got me into Dungeons & Dragons originally, would sit down with the old 3.5 monster manual and be like, page 35.
Oh my god.
And we would test each other to see who could get. I was not as good as Nick was.
No, yeah.
Shout out to Nick if he's watching this. But like, he would be able to tell you what creatures on 35. Would recite the first paragraph of the description verbatim and give you like the basics of its stat line. And like he could do that for any page in the 3.5 monster manual.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff we would do. Like everyone would be out partying and drinking. We would be at home. No one wanted to play D&D with us, so we would just quiz each other on monster.
Red Cap has high dicks.
Just get better at college. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I love this game, but what are you doing?
So
Get better.
for me to answer your question, well, these two do whatever they're doing. I try to introduce things that I have a mini for.
Yeah.
And if I don't have a mini for it, so they don't get a visual like picture of it, I will straight up show them the picture out of the monster manual or Volos. A lot of the times, so that if I want to mix it up, I'll try to find fan art of it online instead.
Oh yeah.
I use that for a lot of NPCs.
Yeah, that's. I
That's
think
huge.
you mentioned that on the podcast, I believe.
Yeah. And I talk about it all the time on my Instagram page too. That
Yeah.
whenever I do an NPC profile, I'm like, this art isn't mine. It just inspired me.
Yeah.
Right. So I will often hold up a picture and say, like this, but with red skin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
One of the other things Adam does in his games that drives me up the wall, but I think it's a brilliant idea for every single DM out there, is if you are unveiling like this miniature that you've picked up that is a monster that the rest of the party doesn't know about, Adam's got this little white chest that he brings to every single session, and we know stuff's about to get real when Adam like, okay, everyone roll for initiative, and he'll lean over and start through the little white chest.
Oh god.
And he'll pull out a thing and drop it on the table and be like, what is that?
everybody leans in and goes, whoa, and Dan's just like, give that to me. I want to see it.
Do you guys do terrain and
What
stuff
was the
too?
one you did the other day? You did a
Garistra.
Garistra demon.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I did not realize they were as big as they were until he dropped that miniature on the table. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna poop a
But I
little
guess
now.
that the question was, do we
beautiful.
give the name away? I don't think you sometimes drop the name. You never really give the name away.
No.
I'm really slow to give the name away. I get so focused on the exploration part of the game. I like to describe how it smells, what it sounds like from the other room, and I don't usually give the name away.
And see, I 100% agree with that because I've noticed that for myself, because us as D&D players who are obviously veterans and we played for a while and we've DM'd, we know what the heck, like how intense a Gristro is. However, the rest of the people sitting at the table, they might not. They might be new at D&D, so a dryad that's the size of a house has no meaning to them. Now, if you describe it and you go in and explain like the beholder with the giant stalks of eyes, then that's terrifying. Anybody can listen to that and be like, "Holy fuck, what the hell are we up against?"
Yeah, and that keeps that sense of wonder to the game as well. That whole exploration thing that we talk about a lot is the pillar that gets missed.
Yeah.
Is trying to maintain that and hold on to that. Yeah.
One of the things that I've done to kind of counteract Dan, because he's got literally 20 years of experience more than anybody else at the table, is
I'm being experience shamed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was enlightened before you guys were.
Losers.
Real quick, Dan, what edition did you start with?
I started with AD&D way back when, and then
we're about the same age then, probably.
I'm 33.
Okay, yeah, close.
Yeah. So yeah, I started with AD&D, and then I played AD&D for about, I want to say 5 years before I started doing third, and then played third for 6 months, and then they released 3.5 or however long that gap was. It doesn't feel like it was a long
2
time.
weeks.
And then we played 3.5 for years.
Years and years.
I had every single book. There was I haven't mentioned this on the podcast, but I had a massive collection of D&D minis that one of my old roommates decided to steal from me and sell so that people could huff the melted plastics. Yeah, I had like
What's his address?
$10,000 worth of minis. It was
What's
ridiculous.
his social security number? I will hunt him down.
Right?
I just nearly fell off my chair. That's, okay, this chair is very loose and it looks sarcastic, but I actually nearly did fall off the chair.
But like I've been doing this for a while, and then my first foray. I'm a carpenter.
The first time I had a 4-way.
Dungeon Master.
This is what I'm talking about, okay? Don't be talking about...
Okay, they do this when we record audio. They'll just jump on me.
Tell us about your first foray.
No, okay.
Tell us about the time you lost your V card.
Another level.
My first.
This is
my
Twitch.
first
We can say that, right?
foray, thank you, into 5th edition was actually with Adam and his game. We were doing Pathfinder for the most part, because my group of friends were so like anti 4th edition, because like we all play World of Warcraft, and I'm like, why are we gonna roll dice and play WoW and MMO when we could just play an MMO? So we played Pathfinder for years, and then Adam was like, I'm starting this new group with 5th. I'm like, okay, sure, and that's when I joined that.
But I mean, Dan may only know, 3.5 stuff, but a lot of it carries over. The auras are different, the stats are different, but he knows essentially what a drow is already. Yeah. So one of the things that I do is I dig into Pathfinder all of the time. All of their minis and stuff I will grab and I will use, because I start to describe this giant 8-foot tall crab monster. Dan's like, oh, this is a homebrew thing, and then I pull out a mini and he goes, wait, stop everything, what is this nonsense? Yeah. So that's how I counteract the experienced players at the table, is by pulling from other places as well.
Yeah, I grew up playing 3.5, and obviously I feel like that's when the minis got really big. And so all of my experience with the minis, and my brother and I collected them when we were growing up as kids. But as an adult now, I still had those. I actually, probably about like 8 months ago, called my parents and I was like, can you mail me those minis that I have stowed away somewhere? And then they sent them to me, and actually it was this huge, awesome collection. Just monsters that I personally hadn't even like read or seen about in years. And some of them were, they might have been modified types of creatures. But it's always fun to pull out of things, like especially if someone plays a lot of 5th edition, that they might have never even heard of. I can't think of a lot of good examples off the top of my head, but I know the minis are a great way, especially to emphasize the visuals. And to the way that I personally do it is I will go ahead and describe the creature and the environment and everything, and then pull out the map and pull out the miniature, and then everybody can kind of like, oh my god, it flips the switch, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Do you guys do a lot of terrain with your sessions?
We do maps. We don't do physical terrain. Doors that I will put in, because sometimes it's hard to tell on a drawn map where the door is in a wall.
Yeah, I mean, we've done trees sometimes, I guess,
yeah,
but it didn't work too well. We preferred it without it.
And again, rocks and stuff. So
most of what we'll do are things like this, which I just happen to have on hand.
Here's one we made earlier.
This was a pygmy sacrificial pit.
Yeah.
That Adam drew up for our game. I'm not sure how well the internet could see this picture, but Yeah, just sits down with a bunch of Crayola markers. I don't think he ever really grew out of kindergarten.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but he
It is breathtaking.
Put the map down.
No, that is badass though.
Yeah, we'll take a picture of it and throw it up online. But I do a lot of my prep work and my thinking and my planning as a DM while I'm doodling maps out.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from, especially to try to keep the environment, like we talked about, the exploration is lost a lot of the time. When I'm sitting there drawing a map, I'll just put in details here and there to be like, I don't know if they're going to go over to that outhouse, but if they do, there's a secret message in there. I don't know if they're going to go over to this rock over here, but if there is, there's going to be a old rusted dagger under here. And 9 times out of 10, you guys never find this stuff.
No.
But I'm having fun making maps, and I'm starting to build the world. Who put this dagger here?
Yeah.
Was there an exploration party that came through before? And then, it's a good idea, so they're going to find remnants of a campsite.
I'm so glad you mentioned
like
that, actually, because I'm the same exact way. Is like I might not have a general idea of I might have the general idea of an encounter, but I have no idea what monsters I'm going to use, and I want to use something that's off the hat, something fresh, something new. I will start making the map first. So for you guys, and Keith, I want to hear your answer too. If you had to give advice to a new DM or even an old DM that's just seeking inspiration, what would you tell them as far as creative process goes, to where to start and what to do first?
For building maps?
For encounters, building maps, playing in a session, whatever.
So what I would recommend that DM do is talk to his players and ask them what they want. To a certain extent, like what kind of things are they looking for in a campaign?
Especially experienced players that have played orcs 900 times.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to be building this entire massive, the orcs are uprising and all the tribes are getting together to, some Obald mini arrow nonsense is happening. You don't want that to happen when you've got players at your table that have just spent a month doing that, right? Or years doing that. So, I would start talking to your players in that session 0, figure out exactly what you guys want to do. Have a couple loose ideas, I'm thinking of doing a, Game of Thrones inspired, or I'm thinking about doing a Lord of the Rings inspired, where you're trying to, take the MacGuffin from point A to point B, and there's that journey, right? That kind of campaign inspiration, and then from there, you start low and build out from there, right? I believe very much in a bottom-up form of building campaigns.
Yeah.
Maybe your sex tape.
But they
start with the foursome.
This is the kind of way I would do it. Is I would start with polling your party and then building based off what they want to do, because you want them to be invested. So if you're hitting these points that they've brought up, they could go. And that could be something as simple as you talk to your players and they'll say, "Oh, I want to play a human fighter this time," and you go, "Can you give me more than that, please?" But really build into if they want to play a very character focused campaign. You now know, okay, well, I need everyone at the table to build a character. Send me backstory so I could build a campaign based around your backstories and build it up from there.
You're looking more at having then social aspects to your combat encounters.
Yeah.
Right? And so you can take it from that perspective.
Yeah. I think for just purely on the basis of encounters, I think get good with theater of the mind and practice it. Because if you're relying on maps all the time, you're destining yourself to just be 2D all the time. When you can get good with theater of the mind, you go completely 3D. Myself and Adam I think maybe all 3 of us were talking the other day about underwater fighting, underwater campaigns, and how you have to be good with theater of the mind for that, because you're going to go in all different directions and there's different rules based on what you do. And I think for terrain, just talking above water on land, when you can get good with theater of the mind and you can control that encounter, you can go in all different directions. You're able to handle combat or encounters with flying aspects, with people scaling cliff faces and trying to fight at the same time. If you're relying on grids, you're forever destined to be fighting in a desert or an open field, because you're not able to handle that theater of the mind. So yeah, practice theater of the mind.
I love that, because I've recently shot myself in the foot by always doing maps, because I try to do a theater of the mind encounter. I've done it a couple times, but I have my players ask me questions like, okay, well, are they hiding behind a barrel? It's like, just can you bear with me here for just a minute?
Yeah.
So
the other thing I've noticed is if you go so reliant on drawing up your maps and drawing up your grids, players are the avatars of chaos and they exist solely to mess up whatever plans you may have.
Fucking
So you'll have like this, I don't know, massive guerrilla warfare in a city, and you'll have drawn up tons of maps about the guerrilla warfare in the city, and your players will be like, I'm just going to use this magic item and make all the giants run away, and then all of this work in maps that you have done is for nothing. I mean, save them, put them aside, find another way to integrate them. But in the spot, you now have nothing planned for the session, and you got to be like, okay, so what do you guys want to? Oh, you want to go fight goblins instead? Well, crap. Okay. So like getting good at theater of the mind will open up your ability to roll with the punches that your
100% makes you more flexible.
Yeah, it makes you far more flexible.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, Keith, what about you?
Well, Adam, do you want to go ahead?
When I'm designing an encounter, I look at essentially there are three aspects that I look at. One is difficulty level. I try to vary it with mild, moderate, and massive difficulty levels. I call it the 3 M's in my head. And I try to rotate through them on a regular basis. I want to hit something that's really hard once every 10 combats or 10 explorations even, like trying to get down a waterfall. We're going to make this real hard for you guys, right? So that's one side. Another side is, are we going to do social? Are we going to do combat? Are we going to do exploratory? And then the last thing is, who was the last person to get a spotlight?
Oh, yeah.
Because if I've got a fighter with the sentinel feat, then so he's stopping people from running away. I'm going to give him a whole bunch of cowardly kobolds or bandits that bite off more than they can chew that are trying to run, and he's going to be able to stop them. We don't need to do that for the next 2 or 3 encounters, because he has his spotlight. Now we're going to go over to the sorcerer, and we're going to give something that's a magic spell casting, whatever. And then the rogue will have an encounter to sneak past while everybody else is causing a distraction. So I try to get everybody to have their turn in the spotlight every session if possible, which is easy because we play for 8 hours at a time. So everybody gets a few chances.
Yes, dude.
And you just reminded me of something there, Adam. We've talked about it before on the podcast. When you were saying whether it be an exploration encounter or social encounter, the reason we try and stay away from relying on maps, or we bring the map out only when the combat is started, as soon as you put a map out, if you put it out too early, you're telling the players, we are now fighting. That is your only option. Don't try and talk to this person. I put the map out. If you leave the map away until they decide they're going to fight, then it can be a social encounter. Then there's more options. Then they start looking at the environment and asking you questions. If you go to the map too soon, you're telling them, we're now fighting. So forget anything else.
Then you get into turn basis. It's like, okay, now I want to move here and I want to move here. That's huge, because I have personally, you guys have a lot of really good points. I personally have done that and completely ruined like the thrill element of like and then the big bad evil guy pops out. So I 100% resonate with that. For anybody out there listening, save your maps, because as soon as you describe a situation and you lay down a map, just like Terry, you just said, it's like, okay, now we're here to fight. Where you can always sometimes avoid combat situations like that. So that's awesome.
It just gives the players options,
Keith, what about you?
I mean, it pretty much kind of intertwines all 3 of them, starting with Dan. I like to talk to the players and figure out what kind of campaign they want to do. And typically mine's pretty much 50-50. It's right in the middle. We've got a good mix of everything. And then when I build, like for the homebrew, I build small into big. I start with, okay, either an idea or a person or a small town, and then I build it like, what does that town do? How do they make money? Do they trade, and build from there? Are they at a mountain base by a lake? And kind of just build that world, and then continue to build each area until it all expands together. And then the other big thing that I love to do is get their backstories. Like, I forget which one of you said that, but I love intertwining the backstories as much as possible, because it really brings I feel like it really brings the world to life for the players, because this is affecting their character on a personal level. And so far I've got everybody except for really the only one is my son. He's the only one that hasn't given me a backstory. And we're only about 13, 14 months into the campaign.
It'll happen. Just give him time.
It might. But yeah, I just love...
duct tape him to the chair and be like, where did you grow up?
Why did you drop off? Mystery to everybody.
Your father's name is Keith. Just give me something.
Yeah, I really love bringing the backstories in. And as far as encounters, I'm the same way. I don't bring the map out until it's absolutely going to be a fight, and that's the option they've chosen, like you said, Gary. Otherwise, trying to let them work in that theater of mind as much as possible, and just I think improv and just ad lib on what they say when they ask for things. Is there anything to hide behind here? Is there something over here that I can look for? And just kind of making up on the fly if you don't already have that planned in. That's really key.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question that I want all of you guys to answer from two perspectives. I want to hear from the player perspective and also the DM perspective. You can choose which one to answer. But as a player or DM, how do you keep the threat level high? How do you keep the necessity for urgency to make sure to keep everybody engaged? So it's not just like, oh, 3 goblins pop up. I'm going to kill this guy, kill this guy, kill this guy. What I found is that people use, DMs specifically grant short and long rests too often, so that every player always has a max spell slot. They always have their special ability. As a DM, how do you make sure to keep players engaged and that the threat is real, no matter what the difficulty?
I just felt like no. I just felt the excitement start radiating off Adam. We were all like, oh, excellent! How do I mess with my party?
How do I hurt them?
I do 2 things. Really, primarily, I keep pulling the curtain off, and Dan's like, "That's what you're doing, damn it!" But one of the things that I do is I put a ticking clock in the campaign. In a certain number of days, this horrid shit is going to happen. You guys know that it's going to happen, and I try to give in this number of hours, in this number of days, and in this number of weeks, this is going to happen. They know the goddess of death is going to come in, and currently in the campaign, they're doing everything they can to delay that, but it is inevitable. Also, Dan's character's daughter is missing. They have discovered that she's trapped in an underwater city, and there's an army of undead walking across the bottom of a giant inland sea towards the city, and that's days away. And then also we have a certain number of hours in order for us to do a hostage exchange with some evil elves that have taken a witch that was the head of a coven, and so they have to go deal with that in order to find the person that can help him get down to the sea, to rescue his daughter, to stop the army of undead. We're trying to get the goddess of death. So I just layer it, and I think my 3 ticking clocks all of the time.
He's also not mentioning the fact that based in the world, there is it is the same, the weather has the same all year,
every year on March 3rd, it always rains. Every year on April 3rd, it's always sunny. And so I've mapped out the weather patterns, and so they're in hurricane season as well.
Yeah, so we know in 2 days, it's going to take us 3 days to get to this point, but in 2 days, hurricanes are going to hit, and you can't be in the rivers, and it's a sunken city that's in the middle of a river. So it's just come on. And we've been building up to this for a while.
Months
to get to this point, and having that kind of constant clicking,
that ticking clock, that idea really works.
How do you keep track of that?
I sat down when I first started building the campaign, and I built a calendar, and then I sat down before, right around session 3 actually, when I decided who my big bads were going to be, and they're all introducing themselves, and they're out on striking out from their first village for the first time. I'm sitting, all right, so my evil wizard, for example, is going to be over here, and they're going to be trying to get spell components. They're going to be able to get this one on this day, this one on this day, and this one on this day, and complete the spell on this day. I plot it on the calendar, and then I let them know that that's happening. And so they need to figure out, are we going to interrupt it, or are we going to let it happen and deal with the outcome? And then I usually give you guys 3 or 4 options, 3 or 4 different threads that you can follow, and it just makes the whole world feel more expansive.
Yeah.
And then I am not afraid to interrupt a combat with another combat, or an exploration with a combat, or a combat with a social encounter. I will straight up interrupt an encounter with another one to keep you from getting your rest.
Yeah. Adam likes playing the fatigue game. quite heavily.
Yeah, I played with exhaustion a lot.
We've played how many sessions in this campaign? It's been
22.
We've played 22 sessions, and I'm fairly certain my drugged out, chemically dependent gnomish investigator has had some level of exhaustion for more than 3/4 of the sessions.
Yeah.
It's just been like, okay, Dan, what are you doing? Well, I guess I'm getting high tonight.
It's a high threat world. Like, we have to try very hard to secure a place that we can rest.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I do is I give allies more allies than enemies. If there's going to be a named NPC, they want to help the party.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I have someone to threaten. I don't need someone from your backstory. For the most part, your backstory is relatively safe.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to know where you come from. And then I want you to make choices, and those choices to have some sort of consequence. So whether or not you befriend the kobold druid that you run across, he's now an ally. He's going to be a guide. We've got a couple of kobolds that are absolutely like fan favorites amongst our group. Cronus's, there are more than one, but they.
I'm just picturing like a horde of like fangirl kobolds, like groupies.
Yeah. But they're there so that I can threaten them, and the NPCs will die, because an NPC, a beloved NPC that you put your time and effort into, killing your squire is worse than killing your character for some people.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, well, you were talking about the threat of death, but what we're saying here is there's some fates worse than death to a D&D player and a character, and it doesn't always have to be about death. It is, what does that player value, and that's what we're going to threaten. For some people it's items, some people it's goals, some people it's their alignment, it's their NPC. Adam gave me an NPC wife and a child. So straight away I was on suicide mission after suicide mission to keep these people alive.
Yeah.
And she keeps saying, stop going out adventuring. I need you here to raise our daughter. Please don't do this. What happens if you die? And then she died. She was murdered by the bad guy, taken because she was married to you. And then you got trapped in a cave-in, and your daughter's essentially an orphan now.
So I think when we're saying how do we keep that threat alive, is I think DMs get too tunnel visioned on how can I make this player think their character is going to die, when there's more things that you can threaten. You have a whole character sheet of stuff that you can hurt. It's not just hit points. You know, if you can find a way to permanently damage the intelligence of a wizard, especially if it was their fault, that's going to hurt them more than killing them.
I miss that from earlier edition too. The stat point damage and the constant like you could get dismembered and still be alive and just not be able to use your offhand weapon because you don't have an offhand anymore. Right? I miss that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have two memorable beloved MPs that I would do anything to protect. Well, apart from my wife and child, is we have a 9-year-old Kenku.
Yeah.
9.
Yeah.
A 9-year-old Kenku child who insists on following us everywhere, that we have to protect.
He just loves you guys.
Yeah, and then we have a goblin that we adopted and raised who can't speak goblin because he was actually a horse that was transformed into a goblin, so never learned goblin.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he just speaks broken common. But yeah.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, you just need to threaten the other things around. And remember, and I think a lot of people miss this, in earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons, the environment was an issue. The first half of original D&D was getting to the dungeon, and the second half was defeating the dungeon, right? And then there was a question of how do we get the treasure back? We don't have that anymore. Everybody has a bag of holding and a steed, and we can do it.
Yeah.
We don't have landslides or hurricanes or thunderstorms. Mm-hmm. Why is there not more environmental or regional or... I like the fit that has lair effects and regional effects now.
Yeah. But
we should have that all of the time. If you're going through the mountains, someone should probably die.
Yeah. Why is your clothing never an issue? If you're wearing your magic slippers, your magic elves cabbage slippers or whatever you're wearing, why is that not an issue when you're going through a mountain? You know.
Right.
Yeah. That's exactly one thing that I've tried to bring into our campaign more is weather. And just advise them what the weather, and there are snow-capped mountains in there that they're traveling through, and making sure that they have to dress appropriately for the different seasons. That's a huge thing I like to actually bring in, that kind of brings out realism and makes them have to think about handling certain situations differently.
Absolutely. You can take it further. Don't be afraid to give your barbarian sunburn if they're walking around with the shirt off, right? It's their own fault.
Yeah.
You give them a level of exhaustion, knock their con down.
At level 19, they got melanoma.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, guys.
Oh my god.
That's great.
Rage through that.
Yeah, exactly. That's still gonna burn, bitch. And I think the reason why people don't have a lot of that in games is because, and Keith, we've talked about this before, but you have Adventures League where, yes, they're pickup games, which are great. It's here's your quests. You have to do this, this, and this. The big bad guys over here do that. And you cram in a session of D&D in 4 hours, and you kind of get that cool, awesome, yeah, I play D&D. But with these homebrew sessions, I feel like people sometimes get in that mindset where they need to railroad through shit all the time, and it needs to be this, needs to be that. I need to get here, I need to get there, and I feel like at its roots, D&D is the journey. It's traveling to get there, going through those hardships, and as amazing as 5th edition is, and everything that Wizards has come up with, Wizards of the Coast has come up with in recent years, I think it's lost a tinge of that element of like your barbarian does get sunburn. Your wizard, who is brilliant, is starting to get Alzheimer's. He's starting to lose his mind. And I think that those things are what really added the depth to the game. And having the calendar, I think that's absolutely brilliant. So it's a really neat perspective to hear you guys mention those things.
I think we get too focused on, and this is DMs as well. Like I think we've all done it to an extent. All DMs in the world. We have to check our ego a little bit because we build these worlds and this big bad evil guy, and this is the thing that we want them to get to. We want them to enter the final room and see them, and so all of this journey to that point gets forgotten because we're so focused and so tunnel visioned on trying to get to this big exciting moment. But that's not the game. That's one scene in the game. The game is trying to get there. It's trying to survive along the way. You know, we were talking about Tomb of Horrors is in Chult or Tomb of Annihilation?
Tomb of Annihilation.
Tomb of Annihilation is a very small part of that game. The rest of it is the hex crawl through the jungle.
Yeah.
And that should be the main part, you know?
Well, I mean, you look at why medieval societies and ancient societies existed in the first place, and that's really the template that we're using is medieval societies as a general rule. People banded together for safety. The moment you're out of the walls of the city or you're beyond the village, the world needs to actively try to kill you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how far away that other town is. You need to get there, and not everybody does, right?
So not everybody's an adventurer.
Yeah, and that's why the roadside tavern needs to be a little bit more rough and tumble. That's why every merchant should have a bodyguard, right? So that they can't just like come across a merchant's cart and your murder hobos just decide to loot it and go. They can try, but the merchant's a level 15, sorcerer, and has got a level 19 fighter, on his back watching them, and they should be there, and you should have it be that difficult to just roll up and take stuff. We really focus Dungeons and Dragons now on rewarding the players, and I like that. We need to feel heroic.
Yeah.
We need to feel like we're getting an accomplished storyline out of the way. But I think a lot of the time we're just kind of patting people on the head at this point.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of scary stuff in 5th edition. We don't have our
colossal size.
Yeah, our colossal size is gone. Our auras are gone.
Yeah.
The stat damage is gone.
Long-term injuries. I mean, we were talking before. We were having an argument about hit points, saying, why are you just as effective at 1 hit point as you are at 150, and then all of a sudden you're not. There's no scarring. There's no loss of limbs.
Yeah. So whenever somebody drops to 0 hit points in our campaign, you gain a permanent scar from the attack that hit you, and you need to find a restoration spell to get rid of it.
Yeah, Lockie is basically one big walking ball of scar tissue at this point.
Yeah. We have a very hideous gnome now.
Sorry, he's a gnome, so he's one small walking ball of scar tissue.
That's brilliant.
But there isn't enough of that. 3.5, and I think the problem is 3.5 did that to death. There were, I think, 2 or 3 books a year coming out. 3.5 only existed for like 6 years, and there were 50 some odd books.
Yeah.
Right? And they just kept coming.
They're releasing new content every month.
Yeah, and so everybody just kind of hit fatigue at that point from it. And so they hit us with 4th edition, which was admittedly flawed, but they did have some things that, like the bloodied condition. When you get below 50 hit points, you are bloodied, and that can trigger things in some of the monsters. Gnolls go into a frenzy if they sense that amount of blood, right? Sharks will beeline for you and focus on you if you have less than 50 hit points. We don't have that in 5th ed anymore, and I think that would solve a lot of the problems of this short rest here, long rest here, Everybody has healing spells. It's okay.
Well, at the same time, you also want your party to feel very accomplished and very heroic and stuff like that. So another thing you could steal from fourth that we've talked about before is the minion.
Yeah.
I don't know why the minion didn't exist in 3.5 and why it doesn't exist in 5th. You need that one dude who's just like a standard everyday warrior, but he's got 1 hit point.
Yeah.
You hit him once, he's down, right? And that
the
way
torchbearer.
You could fill a field. You could fill a field with like 60 things, but that's only 60 hit points. I mean, action economy is going to be a thing, but you have a...
But your monk and your fighter and your area of effect...
And your wizard dropping a fireball on 16 things that all just... You just pick up this clump of miniatures and pull them off the table or whatever. Like, that's going to make your players feel more heroic or more powerful.
It's very rewarding.
It's very rewarding, yeah.
Yeah. You said something earlier that kind of sparked up a question from... I run into it every single time we play D&D. What is your creative process in the milliseconds that you have whenever a PC wants to do something off the hat and you have to create up an NPC essentially, or a shop off the top of your head? How do you guys do that? Because I know I have a personal way that I do it, and kind of I have a repertoire of people that I draw from. But how do you guys do that?
Mm-hmm. Who's going first?
You can go. I talk a lot.
You want to go?
I'll go. Unfortunately, I have that reputation as the lazy DM, and I have that experience of playing the game for a while, so I kind of just make stuff up. But I have been reprimanded by my co-hosts many, many times that that's not fucking helpful, Dan. Do something else. So to kind of get into it, what I'll do is I will make it up. I'll kind of play into the tropes in those situations. So if they are, say they are in a random village in the middle of nowhere and they want to go see the blacksmith and I haven't prepped a blacksmith, I will play into the trope of, okay, he's probably a dwarf, and he's probably very practical and straight and stout and honest, and like he's straight to the point and all these other things. And I will play that way, and I'll really embrace the tropes when I'm caught off guard. If it's things like they're going to a tavern and I've built like, here are the 3 NPCs that I really want you guys to talk to, but they go talk to the goblin instead. And I'm like, okay, well now I've got to make up a goblin and need to make him interesting. I'll read the room and figure out what exactly are they looking for in that NPC, and I'll give it to them, right? Like there's no reason why you can't reward your characters and your players for thinking outside the box in those situations, unless it's something that'll break your game. Like if you're doing an undead campaign and they just happen to stumble across a high power like life cleric, how about no? Like try to figure else out. Or if you do make that mistake, kill them real quick and make them weep for bringing this creature into this world. That's what I do. So I would just kind of pull from the tropes and use those. And also, if you need to roll stats on the fly, I kind of roll a base of, base 10 on everything. And if it's a more difficult encounter, I'll go a little bit north. If it's a little bit easier encounter, I'll go a little south. And I'll base it off of proficiency now in 5th edition as well. So, like, if I'm making up a basilisk, but I can't find the basilisk page in the book, I'll be like, okay, well, it's got a +8 to hit, because I know it's going to be a little bit harder for that level 5
But you're
party.
drawing on your own experience from that as well.
I'm drawing from my own experience, but I also make up a lot of creatures on the fly, and just in every aspect, they are off the top of the dome. So it'll be, I'll make up these little aspects, these little interesting characteristics that the party will focus on, or I hope the party focuses on, that makes them unique, that will hide my flubbing the numbers on the other baseline stuff.
I have you said encounters with NPCs and things, like if they're in town or whatever. I have this weird system that I do where I channel characters that are not very well known from movies that I watched years ago.
Oh.
So if something happens, if they suddenly start speaking to an NPC that didn't expect them to, that NPC will be Richard Gere from The Jackal, or it will be Michelle Pfeiffer from Grease 2.
Yeah.
Because I can channel that character in my head they're not necessarily going to get it as easily as if I start impersonating Snape or something.
Right.
But a movie that I happen to know, I happen to like, or a book or a character that I can channel will get me through the encounter because I already have their characteristics, their mannerisms, really their alignment, and everything else is easier to build up from there. I also have a system where I have what I call not so random encounters. So if things start going a little bit south or they go in a direction that I wasn't expecting, I can drop a pre-prepared encounter, which I might have made up 6 months ago for just such a situation. I can just drop down into the game.
Right.
That'll buy me 90 minutes because I've rehearsed it in my head of how those people are going to act in the situation. And it could be something creative to do with environment. It could be, trolls or ogres or something setting a rock trap or something like that. But it gives me that 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever to kind of gather myself and get them, give them a good game moving in the direction that they want to go. Or just channel Bruce Willis from some movie in the 80s, not Die Hard.
Fuck it. Send it.
Like a third of every single innkeeper in Terry's campaigns is Basil Fawlty.
Or Moss from the IT crowd.
Or Moss from the IT crowd, yeah.
Beautiful. I have a bad...
For me, one of the things that I do is, or the only thing that I do really, is I prep a sheet ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And it just has names, and I've got columns on it. One will be like shop names, one will be like inn and tavern names, and then I do first names, last names, races, and usually a quirk and a flaw. So a personality type and a flaw, and I don't roll it. It's not a random table that I'm rolling on. I look at it and I go, I like that for this, I like that for this, I like that for this, and I build it that way. And then depending on what's going on, I like to subvert a trope maybe, where the blacksmith is an old elf, right? You don't think of that a lot of the time,
yeah.
So it's going to make it unique. I'll tell you this right now, I try to breathe a lot of reality into my world by using female NPCs as a baseline for absolutely anything. And so it's very different. There's a lot of like matriarchies in my world as well for the same reason. And it's interesting because when you have a male shopkeeper, standard human, male, middle-aged, walk up to the counter and say, "What can I get for you?" They're going to murder him.
Yeah.
If you have it be a woman, they will stop and have a conversation.
Very true.
If there's a guy that narrows his eyes and says, "What can you do for me?" everyone's going to stop and say, "Okay, he's up to shit." If a woman does it, everyone stops and goes, "Oh, she's suspicious of us. We need to get on her good side." And so just swapping the gender on NPCs can make a radical difference.
Yeah, that is huge. Keith, what about you?
Kind of the same way as Adam. I typically have a list of names prepared and just ideas about the characters, races, stuff like that, just to be able to pull from aside whenever I need to a random name or character. And typically I'll play them kind of suited for what area or town they're in. It'll be kind of based off that. If it is a dwarven town or elvish. If it's a mix, then I'll kind of just make it up on the fly. And much like Terry, I do actually draw on movies or characters that I know from the past and will mimic that type of stuff sometimes because it'll just be all of a sudden the first thing that'll pop in your head, like you said, and you'll be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll use that character from this movie. And kind of do that voice, and then the attitude comes along with it.
Yeah.
If that's good, friendly, evil, whatever the case may be, and go from there.
100%. No, I think that's all four of those are great resources and tools that you can use in anybody's game for kind of NPCs on the fly. One thing that I've just kind of thought about as you guys were going through all of your guys' processes of doing that is, so I actually do a little bit of acting, and there's a really big, it's a very popular technique known as the hot person exercise. So if, say, for the sake of D&D, if you are walking into a situation where you need somebody from somebody, you're going to act a certain way to them. Think about that in your everyday life. So if you can think about that person that you need something from, maybe it's your mom and you were a kid and you want to get a raise from your allowance, something like that. It really kind of shifts a switch and makes you think, okay, how would I really act in this situation? And if you can kind of look at that at a backwards way, as a DM, kind of looking at, okay, I'm a shopkeeper, these people are walking into my shop, they look this way, They look like experienced adventurers. I know I might be able to swindle them over. I'm going to act this certain way. But the hot person exercise is something that I've personally kind of implemented in how I treat NPC or players whenever they encounter something that I'm not exactly expecting. And even sometimes when people do have something that I'm expecting. One way, we have quite a bit of people pop in every once in a while just as guests for sessions, but I like to keep a very congruent storyline. So one thing that I always try to do is have a support character, support NPC that can kind of fill in the gaps where that person's stepping in, either they don't know or their character doesn't know, but that NPC can kind of help move the story along. So, and I know there's been a lot of people out there that have talked about tools and techniques that are kind of similar to that as well. But no, it's always interesting to hear different aspects and how different tools or methods in which people use to do things like that. Because I know that's something that happens literally every time you play D&D.
Yeah, my least favorite thing ever is when Terry looks at me and goes, "Oh, what's that one's name?" About a town guard, and I go, "God, give me 30 seconds, guys. Talk amongst yourselves."
I like to build a relationship with the NPCs. I like to get attached to them.
That is Jeff.
That's Jeff. Again, Jeff?
Yeah.
The last guy was
This is Jeff Jr.
Yeah.
Jeff with a G.
So Jeff, good.
I have one player that does the exact same thing to me. He will just egg me on every time and just completely try and randomly talk to anybody. He's even used to speak with animals, and he'll just say, I roll for perception. I want to see if there's an animal around, and he'll try and talk to a rat or a bird or anything he can get.
It's worse when it's speak with plants. What do you do?
Oh my God! No.
Let's hear the plant voice.
Yeah, man.
They all sound like tree beard.
Come on, Audrey.
That's great. I love it. Well, guys, Keith, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask him?
I mean, yeah, we could go on for hours, but no, I'm good for now.
Yeah, no, we're definitely gonna have to have you guys on again because this has been absolutely great.
Were you gonna ask your signature question too?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So, one thing that I want to ask everybody that comes on here, if you guys could have one person in which you could play D&D with, it could be somebody that's alive, an actor, a past president, someone that's deceased, whatever, you could play D&D with for a session or a campaign, who would it be? And whether it's DM or have them as a player, who would it be?
Do they have to take it seriously?
No.
It can be however you want.
Anybody.
One person.
I don't want to do the cookie cutter and be like, I would have loved to roll with Gygax.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would have. But that's like the cookie cutter. Like,
I think it would be a lot different with him than you're expecting. I think a lot of the times, because there are stories about total strangers back in the 70s and 80s, like flipping through the phone book and calling his house and being like, "What did you mean by this rule?" Because they didn't have the internet.
Shit.
Like, there's no way to talk to anyone. And he would tell them, "Well, how did you do it?" Then that's the right way. And so I think he was all fast and loose with it until he started to run into copyright issues. Then he was like, no, these are my rules. This is how it is.
Yeah.
So there's early Gygax, there's late Gygax, depending on...
I would have liked early Gygax. I think if I was to go with someone who's living and breathing now,
That's why you don't want to play with late Gygax.
Oh,
Can I not make that joke? I don't know if we can make that joke.
This is not the lawful evil campaign.
And today in D&D at Bernie's,
I've offended everybody. I've offended the Overlord.
Everybody leave in the comments whether Terry crossed the line.
Oh, Jesus.
Who do you want to play with?
Okay, so I was really charmed by seeing Stephen Colbert play with Matt Mercer.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I would want to play with Stephen Colbert. I just would want that level of excited, investing player, like at the table with me, sitting there being like, "This is fantastic. Let's do more." And I would love that. But that's just because I saw that like last night, and I'm all stoked about it.
Yep.
Normally, the person I would want to play with would be Deborah Ann Wolf.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wool. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. She's fantastic. I follow her on Instagram.
She might be watching this.
Stuff is D&D now.
she's one of the best characters ever.
Yeah, but she. Most people know her from Daredevil and Punisher, right?
True Blood.
It was in True Blood. So
Yeah, she was in True Blood.
but she's fantastic. She's a good actress too, which is fantastic. She's got a lot of really strong opinions and ideas, which I think make her campaigns entertaining to sit around the table.
Right.
As a DM, I would find myself just listening a lot of the time, which would be fun.
That's actually one of the reasons why, if I was to pick a living person, I'd probably go Kevin Smith. He was on one episode of Relics and Rarities, and I just absolutely loved it.
I hear that he's like the nicest guy.
He's also the nicest guy on the planet, and he loves Vancouver as well.
Is he the Jersey guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what he is most known for.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would get like Kevin Smith around a table, and I think that would be a real good time.
I'd like him.
What about you, Terry?
Me? Joseph Stalin, and I'll tell you why.
Oh God!
What?
Because he's all about the party.
Let me explain.
Right?
Guys, we're cutting out. We're gonna have to shut it off. Yeah. Twitch is.
all right.
Can you imagine the encounters and the scenarios,
Oh,
and they just being brought out in front of you about where it's obvious you have to save the baby or rescue, and then everybody just turns just to see what his character is going to do. He made up a hypothetical fantasy situation, and I just want to be around that table just to see what he's going to say. And also, it's that whole theory of no one remembers the second drunkest person at the party, because I'm apparently shock humor a lot of the time, but no one's going to remember that if he's there. We're going to go nuts.
I don't want him to DM though, because first and foremost, you're in a tundra for the entire thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's like you guys just made 100 gold, but I'm keeping 80.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, no, I don't want him as DM. Maybe as a player.
I think any like traditional psychologist would be a terrible DM. Like, can you imagine playing a game with Freud? No, thank you. Or Nietzsche? Definitely not.
Oh Jesus.
So that's my answer.
Fair enough. And Keith, you're Joe Manganiello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks so much fun.
Yeah, he's just kind of
so invested in the game.
Loves D&D. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I always admired his like resolve with everything. Like he'll state what he's doing for his turn or his action, and then he will roll the dice and he'll give you the answer right away. And so I really appreciate how he like expedites everything, which is awesome. I wish all my players would do that, because you could have so many more rounds of combat. So
does anybody care that Vin Diesel plays D&D and he's the biggest D&D nerd in the world?
No.
Yeah, I'm all over
No,
it.
I'm not. Like, Joe has replaced him in my mind.
yeah.
Really?
As the like beefcake
He
D&D
kind
guy.
of just did that to promote a movie or something, and that he actually doesn't play D&D.
I heard that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that he did it
Yeah,
just for the Witch
dude,
Hunter.
The Witch Hunter movie.
Yeah,
The
the Witch Hunter,
The
that's
Witcher. Was it The Witcher?
No,
The
not
Witcher.
There's The Witch
That's
Hunter.
a separate thing.
No. No, but what's
Name of that movie.
Something like
I
that.
can't remember it, but yeah, that's what I had heard, is that he did that and kind of to promote the movie. And because have you ever heard of him playing D&D outside of that one session with Matt Mercer?
Because surely
No.
he'd be like he'd be with everybody doing. The spotlight with all this stuff going down in LA these days.
Yeah.
Well, there's a bunch. Like, I take a lot of like podcast and D&D podcast media in, mostly because I just thoroughly enjoy listening to other people play. So like I would throw out the Mercers or the McElroy brothers or whatever that is. Like, I'd throw those guys out to play as well. Like, I'd love to sit around the table with the Acquisitions Incorporated crew, like Pat Rothfuss and all of these other guys who really should be writing fucking books, but are still on another bloody D&D. Okay, I have a problem with Pat Rothfuss and how active he is. Anyway.
All right, yeah.
Write your third book, damn it.
Dad.
But I would love to sit around a table with those guys as well. Like, they're just all these incredibly entertaining and creative people. Like,
Oh my God! And how much do you want to sit at Matt Coville's table?
That'd be
or
badass.
Mercer's, yeah.
Yeah. I want to have coffee with these guys more than I want to play D&D, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think that would be too far of something that could possibly happen, because a lot of those guys are super down home, super genuine, and with the way that this community is growing, I think it's definitely something that could potentially happen one of these days, especially with what you guys do and the content you guys produce. All of you, it's been an absolute blast sitting here. I know I love your stuff. I know Keith, you love their stuff. But I'm excited to see where the future goes for everything, with Fire and Dice, with It's a Mimic, with the Coalition, D&D Coalition. I've got no doubt in my mind that this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but thanks for having us.
Yeah,
This
thanks.
has been a lot of
great.
fun.
Really appreciate
hey,
it.
we'll have you guys on again. What'd you say, Keith?
I was just saying thank you. I had a lot of fun. I was definitely looking forward to meeting all of you.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been
it's
good.
been awesome. So hey, real quick, go ahead and give us a rundown real quick. Just where can we find you guys? What do you have going on in the future?
Yep. You can find me on Instagram. I am at sendnoobs, NOOBS DND, sendnoobs DND.
And news.
And that's where I am most of the time, on and off.
Yeah. I'm at Oscar_the_orc, all K's. I'm bad at the social media game, but that's where you can reach
And
me.
marketing, apparently.
You can find me at Rusty Styrofoam on Instagram. But you can find all of us or any one of us at any given time at It's a Mimic. We also have our Twitter is at It's a Mimic D&D.
Yeah.
Send us an email at itsmimic@gmail. And we've got our Facebook page as well. So.
Do you guys have any appearances or anything you guys going to in the near future?
Oh, what do we have lined up? Wait, shut up! No.
Are any of you doing Gen Con?
Sorry?
Are you guys going to Gen Con, any of you?
Gen Con.
We're not doing Gen Con this year. I think the general plan is right now our first step into the con as a entity rather than just to go for fun. I think we're going to do Fan Expo in Vancouver one of these years coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fairly soon. There's also a lot of other smaller gaming conventions here in Vancouver that we want to hit. But I could see us going to the Gen Cons and the
Yeah, we'll hit Seattle at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, Emerald City at some point in time. Like we'll do these things that are closer to us. I think that's the plan. I think that's kind of our next step is
I think we were surprised, how well so early that the podcast seemed to do from our perspective. And so we really didn't plan much for this year, thinking that the first year would just be kind of slow, but it got a little faster.
It got fast, quick.
Yeah.
We got invited to go to Fan Expo in the spring here in Vancouver, and we're like 5 episodes old. Let's pump the brakes and we'll figure this out in the fall. So
yeah, we looked at it and we went, do we want to spend the $300 on setting up a booth or going traveling, or should we buy a mic?
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on us first, and then we're going to start reaching out as a general rule. So I think we're going to be mostly online for a bit.
Yeah.
One thing that we are openly discussing right now is not removing ourselves, but moving.
We're moving Dan.
Moving.
We're just tired of Dan.
We're moving on to doing video content as well as podcasts. We're testing the water, seeing what that looks like as well right now. So keep a eye on the It's a Mimic Instagram page for details of that as they kind of unfold.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
And what about you, Keith? Where can we find you at?
Fire.and.dice on Instagram, and then Fire and Dice on YouTube.
And Keith, I know your Friday Night Fights are super popular. Which season are you on right now?
Third season right now. Third season.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think about midway through sixth fight. I think I just posted.
That's great.
I'm absolutely loving it. Are you grabbing homebrew stuff at this point, Keith?
No, right now, this third season, I decided to pit Wizards of the Coast monsters against Kobold Press monsters.
Okay, that's what it is, because I only recognize about half of them. And I'm like, where are we getting it from?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, and right now, Wizards of the Coast is absolutely destroying them. I think it's 4 matches to 1 so far.
Oh, shit.
2 of them were just obliterations. I mean, it just wasn't even close.
That's awesome. Well, Adam, Dan, Terry, Keith, guys, thank you so much for coming on. Definitely going to have you all on again. I mean, this has been great. But thank you.
I got one last question.
Yeah.
Terry, you going to do a closeout selfie?
I'll do that for you guys. If you want to be in it, I'll do it.
Yes.
How are we going to do this?
All right.
No, we can do it. We can get everybody in.
Can we?
I go square because it makes Instagram.
You got to turn around. Oh, you have to. Okay. All right.
Okay, the trick is you got to do like a little squint, okay?
All right.
We got you. You're in. Post.
That is perfect. Thank you, guys. Well, everybody, thank you for watching.
This together, we love D&D Coalition.
Thank you, guys. You guys are the awesomest. You guys are the shit. Looking forward to more of your content, guys. Go check them out at It's a Mimic, at fire.and.dice, at DnD.Coalition. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned, and we will be back with you sooner rather than later. So, thank you, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.